I've got a conspiracy theory. Normally, conspiracy theories are limited to important issues and not fantasy football, not trivialities like fantasy football. But leave it up to me to find, to dig by way of the papers to find a theory as to why some of you guys are fucking up. What I'm about to read to you are the final scores of a particular owner since week 6, okay? This owner lost in week 6, 81 to 84. Then he loses in week 7, 92 to 99. Loses again, 49 to 73. And then 91 to 103. They win in week 10 by defeating me. How dare you? 102 to 91. Then they lose again in week 11, 63 to 86. And then, just this week, they lose 76 to 91. Now, this person faces Eric this week, and by now, he knows exactly who I'm talking about. We're talking about Pedro, who started the season with a great record of 5-0, and he thought he was just going to have a fucking cakewalk all the way to the playoffs, but that hasn't been the case. Now, the reason why I have a conspiracy, why I think there's a conspiracy to all this is because since week 6, when Pedro suffered his first loss, he suffered his loss 81 to 84 to Joe. Joe, who is 2-10 at this point. So it would surprise you to know that since week 6, Joe has had a better record than Pedro. Pedro's lost 6 of his last 7. Joe's lost 5 of his last 7. So the Joe bug seems like it rubbed off on Pedro, and now Pedro's got to fight for his fantasy life in week 13. But we'll get to those stipulations. We'll get to those stipulations in a minute. There's got to be something here, and I don't remember in recent time where you've seen somebody start off a season with such a good, because if you look at Pedro's scores, the first 5 weeks, he scored 89 points week 1, 103 week 2, 113 week 3, 91 and 141 points. After that, his only double-digit performance was against me in week 10. I'd like to thank you for that, by the way, Joe. I'd like to thank you for coming out against me and just fucking sitting it out against everybody else, you fucking piece of shit. This is your week 12 recap. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start off with the mediocrity of the league. Yes, let's get it out of the way. And yes, I am a part of the mediocrity, sad to say. So Joe, me, and Jay are the 3 worst teams of the season. Now, this is basically a race for the number 1 pick next year. A race which Joe has pretty much locked in. We're going to discuss mathematics a little bit in this installment. I'm shitty at fucking math. I just had to do, simple additions and subtractions. But the commissioner was very incorrect about something that he had said in the chat earlier this week, and I'll get to that in a second. Joe mathematically can still be the worst, can still be the second-ranked team this season. Mathematically, of course, I say because he can still win. I lose, but Joe would have to outscore me by 233 points. That's over 25% of what Joe has amassed this entire season because he has 120 points, which it's not going to be possible. But again, who the fuck knows? Each of Joe's players can score 60 points if that's even fucking possible. So mathematically, it's possible, but it's most likely not going to happen. Now, Jay is the 3rd-ranked team. Jay in this position would want to, I guess you could say, lose, but it would be a douchebag move on his case to lose intentionally. But I guess if that were to happen, I would have to win. Jay would have to lose. And just as long as he doesn't outscore me by 51 points, he would pretty much stay in that slot. He would stay in that third slot. So now that we've got the mediocrity out of the way, let's get to the playoff situations. Let's get to the elimination situations, shall we? Now, the reason why I say that the commish was incorrect is because the commish says that the teams that are in already included him. It included Paul, Andy, Eric, and Ed. Now, that's correct about Andy, Eric, and Ed, but it's not correct about the commish. You know, it's more correct about the commish than it is with Paul. Let's run through Paul's elimination situation. In order for Paul to get eliminated, Hensel and Dro both have to win, but they also have to outscore Paul by, Hensel has to outscore him by 62 points, and Pedro just has to outscore him by 13 points. If this were to happen, the 62-point margin by Hensel, of course, being the most unlikely thing, not as unlikely as Joe and his 233 figure, but it's possible. It's certainly possible for Paul to put up a 54 and Hensel to just fucking soar with a victory and a Paul loss to me, and then all of a sudden Paul's out of the playoffs. Hensel's elimination situation is as follows. I'm sorry, let's get to Dro's first. Dro's elimination situation would he would obviously have to lose, and Hensel would have to win. Hensel would also have to outscore Pedro by 50 points. So definitely a possibility there, but not a likely scenario considering the fact that Hensel's team, it just isn't that good. And Hensel wants to make fun of me in the chats, but I mean, I have 10 more points than Hensel this season, and I am the second ranked worst team in the league. So that pretty much gives you a scope that Hensel's team isn't really his record. I believe he has about 1,042 points, and I have 1,052. Hensel's elimination situation, Dro would just have to win. If Dro wins, he's in, and that's it. So obviously Dro holds most of the cards in that situation. Let's get to the commish. And as I said, it's not a very likely scenario that the commish would be out of the playoffs, but technically it's a possibility because we've got another ridiculous figure here. Paul, Dro, and Hensel would all have to win. Doesn't matter what Paul does points-wise. That would move Paul up to 8 wins. If Orlando loses, that would keep Orlando at 7 wins. So Paul would be in the playoffs. Hensel and Dro would both be tied with Orlando. Except Dro would have to outscore him by 90 points. And Hensel would have to outscore him by 139. So mathematically, it's possible, but it's not going to fucking happen. So I just want to correct, in technical terms, and since fantasy is serendipitous, you never fucking know what's going to happen. And I pretty much say you never know what's going to happen. It's just possible, I believe, within the realm of Paul's elimination. I think that's the biggest long shot this week, the biggest jaw-dropping thing that can happen if both Hensel and Pedro win, and Hensel outscores him by 62 points, and it would be pretty easy for Dro to outscore him by 13 points. So that would be the jaw-dropping scenario. The commish is as good as in, but technically he's still out here. Now, the division situations, as I said, the teams that have officially clinched, there is no fucking way that they can lose. It is Andy, Eric, and Ed. The division situations are pretty interesting. For the number 1 division, Ed wins, and he is the division winner. Okay? If Eric wins and Ed loses, then that would pretty much mean that Eric would be the division winner because Ed has to outscore Eric at that point by 81 points. That would be both tied with 9 wins. Eric at the moment has a 80-point edge on Ed, so he would have to outscore him by that much. In the Caparel division, Andy would just have to win, and he's the division winner. In order for Paul to get the division, Andy would have to lose, and Andy would just have to be outscored by 7 points. So again, that's very fucking possible that Paul could just take that. But I would do everything within my power, which in this season, I guess my power is not there's not a lot of strength to it. But I would do everything in my power to try to prevent Paul from getting that victory, even though it would hurt my soul for Andy to win a division, which he's done before in the past. And we'll get to division victories and things of that nature next week for the round one preview. We'll get into all the season stuff and all the scoring leaders and all that all those shenanigans. But right now, what I want to do is I want to run you by the Week 12 final scores. Of course, I lost to Jay 78-96. Ed lost fucking severely to Eric 59-22. I mean, look, there's your scenario right there. I mean, let's do the math real time here. Minus 59, that's 63. You know, that's a 63-point victory for Eric. So Hensel's scenarios aren't out of the realm of possibility here. So you have Pedro being defeated by Hensel 76-91. That was a very big surprise. Pedro should have locked that down. But as I said, since week 6, Pedro has been the worst team in the league. And that's the better part of the season. Joe defeated by Orlando 76-107. And Taint Sweat defeats Andy defeats Taint Sweat 100-93. The highest point scorer of the week was Eric with 122, and once again, Pedro ties for the worst point total of the week. Last week he tied with me, and this week he ties with Joe. So Pedro needs to get his shit together, or else he's gonna be sipping Kool-Aid on the couch with the rest of us over here. So let's move on to week 13, because week 13 is where the meat and potatoes is. What makes this interesting is with all the scenarios that I mapped out to you guys, everybody in the Caparel division, they don't face each other. So that makes these scenarios even more likely. You've got Bundy going up against Paul. You've got Pedro going up against Eric. Orlando with Jay. Joel versus Ed. And you've got Hensel going up against Andy. So they are separate. And as I said, Pedro holds the keys right now. Pedro's got the keys like DJ Khaled, right? All right, Pedro? You got the keys. You got the keys, okay? If you win, that's it. Hensel's out, and all this shit means nothing. Paul's in. Everybody's in. So if that happens, then, you know, all this goes to shit. But as I said, these are very interesting scenarios. Let's see what happens for this final week. And as always, may your quarterbacks get hurt before they leave the locker room. May your running backs pull their hamstrings. And may your wide receivers get arrested for marijuana possession. Go fuck yourselves.